We have a little pickup at the bar.
Breakfast game.
We have construction going to bathrooms.
This meeting of the board is now called to order. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting on this nice summer evening. And our trustees Snyder and Shelton Harris send their regrets. They will not be here tonight, so we'll move to approve our agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda as printed?
Nothing for me.
I don't think anything from anybody, so there's a motion on page 2, please.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that the Board of Education approve the agenda as printed.
Thanks, Keith. There's a second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. The motion passes, and we'll move forward with our agenda as printed and go to the Superintendent's Report.
Well, the only thing we have scheduled today is a report on the update on our building projects, bond projects. Johnny?
Thank you, Superintendent Beelang, as well as members of the Board of Education. Before I talk about our 2021 bond, I want to update the board on some of our projects related to our previous bond. Last school year, the board approved the purchase of 5 new school buses. I'm happy to report tonight that 4 of those 5 buses have arrived and they are in the district. Those are our regular sized buses. The 5th bus is considered a lift bus, and that bus should be arriving in the district any day now. The storage barns project at the Northern High School campus. We are constructing 2 barns, one for Northern High and one for North Middle School. The topsoil was removed and stockpiled. The excavation around the perimeter beam walls has been completed. For the foundation, the walls have been poured. The topsoil has now been returned to the foundation. And now they're looking to, within the coming weeks, lay down the cement, the flooring, or the foundation for both barns. And our 3rd project is the Auditorium Refresh. Happy to report that the stage floors in both auditoriums are about 90% completed right now. The contractor will come back later this week to address some punch list items. The equipment and supplies have been ordered for the electrical work as well as the sound system upgrades. So those are my updates related to the 2015 bond. Now moving to our 2021 elementary bond, joining me tonight is Doug Milburn, who's the project manager from Tower Pinkster. You've met Mike Galvin before. Doug has been here, but Doug works alongside of Mike. Then Tom Stanek, who's no stranger to us, is our director of Kalamazoo operations for OEK. We're going to just tag team some updates from the board based on what we shared last week related to cost and inflation. So overall, as we look at our board, our projects, last time we talked about this term value engineering. And that's where we go through a series of items within each school to figure out where are some ways we can reduce costs or eliminate parts of the project to bring our costs down. So what we have, we've done a complete value engineering. That process is completed. We took a small reduction of square footage in areas of the building that would have minimal or no impact to the learning environment. So the buildings are slightly smaller, not substantially though, but every square footage of savings of size is a savings in cost. We've tried to optimize our structural framing and materials. So what that means is we're looking at a building having a combination of steel and masonry construction. And then we've also looked to reduce the overall heights of the 2 buildings. We looked at our mechanical system. We want to make sure our mechanical system meets or exceeds our district standards, particularly what aligns with our middle schools. We removed the project learning terraces that are on the 2nd floor. I think Randy referred to them as balconies a few meetings ago, but we've removed that. We've adjusted the roof lines and the canopies as well as the overhangs. We're also looking at selection of interior and exterior finishes, that features that can be competitively bid. And then also, as we're going through this design phase, we're looking at ways in which, as we go out for bids, that we can have alternates. So instead of eliminating certain elements of the projects, they can be listed as alternates. And if our budgeting comes in well, then we can make a decision on whether or not we want to include that in the project. Doug will come and talk to you about the schematic design documentation and what's happening from a design perspective. And then Tom will follow up, Doug, with construction timelines.
Yeah, so as Johnny mentioned, we're now integrating the value engineering decisions that were made and conversations had into an updated set of schematic design documents, which we will share with OAK on Wednesday of this week. So then they can revisit their budgeting and have a revised / final schematic design budget. And as part of that, given the value engineering timeframe, we're also with procurement timelines, we all know that things are challenging to get these days, and in the construction world, it tends to vary, ebb and flow from week to week. We're looking at, us jointly with OAK's team of, are there certain packages or certain equipment that we can finalize sooner than later to get ordered, hopefully one to help with realizing any potential cost savings, but then also just with helping the overall project schedule. And then we will issue our documents, our updated schematic design documents to OAK on Wednesday, and then we'll be proceeding into the next design phase, which we call design development. And just due to timing, planning to come back to the August 22nd board meeting with some updated visuals to share, what the value engineering items, what that now looks like visually on both of the buildings.
And you'll know what impact on the cost those changes will be by the 22nd?
I think we'll have a much better idea once we get the information from Tower Pacer to do this schematic design budget. So that's our goal, is to see where we're at after that. It'll take a couple weeks to do that.
So just really quickly, from a timing perspective, as Doug mentioned, there's a lot of challenges that are out there. They're working on trying to get some early site packages for us. So our goal is to get some of those early site packages and get this out onto the street sometime in December, January. And our target is to start construction on the two projects sometime in the summer of 2023. Part of the goal is to really get those packages out and stage them, just because from the standpoint of the personnel that's out there and the limited amount of contractors. So we'll get started with the site packages. And one of the key things right off the bat is the playground equipment. And then when over at Havel Hill, we have to, there's an easement with some utilities that have got to be moved. So that's really one of the first things that we're going to do over there. So the target is to stage the projects by a couple of months as we go through construction. And the goal is that they will probably catch up to each other, but will allow enough time for the school to do their thing at the end with the furniture and the technology. And the goal is to have those ready for school in fall of 25 for both projects.
Be happy to answer any questions from the board as relates to architect design, construction, or overall PPS work as well.
So we're going to make it a little bit smaller. I mean, obviously these, I believe, are these both 600 people schools that we're building?
Central Elementary is a 600 student school.
So how much square footage are we going down at from?
So we're looking to get a final number once the schematic design is over, but we're looking at as small as like 20 square foot out of the classroom here and there throughout the project. So not substantially in terms of thousands and thousands of square foot taken out of the project.
And how much bigger would that be than what we're doing now? What we have in place now?
I mean, our existing schools, Steve Phelps is my guru, but I would just say Central Elementary.
I can't remember the exact goals.
But I want to say Central L is roughly 60,000 square foot. The existing building, the new building would be north of 70,000 square foot.
Okay, for the same number of kids?
No. Well, no, Central L will increase. So Central L
okay, so that's so it's going to be only 12% bigger, but you're going to have 30% more kids.
Yep, 100. It will be able to hold up to 150 additional students at Central Elementary specifically.
Right.
So maybe a better comparison is Haverhill to Haverhill.
Correct. The new Haverhill will be over 60,000 square footage of space, and their existing building is a little smaller than Central Hill, so I think it's in the 55,000 square foot of space now. So it'll still be larger. Both schools will still be larger than their existing buildings. So when we talk about carving out some square footage of the school, it's not thousands and thousands of square foot of space that will bring them back to their existing size. It'll still be larger.
Well, but what I'm getting at is, you know, it's per pupil per square foot, okay?
Right.
So it's,
still-
Central will be smaller per person per square foot than what they have now. Because you're having building for 150 more kids, so you're building for 30% more kids and you're only increasing your.
Correct. So the building is not growing by 33%. That's correct.
Right.
That's not growing proportionally.
Right.
But our design uses in terms of learning space and things that we're trying to accomplish, we're trying to make sure our buildings are, as I shared with the board in an earlier segment, about the learning environments being protected during school, and then after school, we can shut off some of those learning areas for our after-school programming. So our community and after-school programs and the like will still be able to access cafeteria space, gymnasium space, what we're calling our gathering sphere or learning sphere, and those types of spaces. So we still want to keep those available for our public after school hours. Any other questions related to Bob?
Thanks for the update.
All right, thank you also.
Thank you, John. That's it on any reports from me.
So I'll move to the board application.
Absolutely. So next up are Mike Huber and Paula Johnson to give you an update on the kind of a refresher on the federal funds. As you know, we've had a lot of federal funds coming into the district the last couple of years. And this one is just to kind of review that, but focus on what our intentions are around the last pot of money, what's referred to as 11T. So I won't steal any more of your commentary and let you go to your report.
Good evening and thank you, trustees. Tonight we just wanted to update you on our student supports through the use of federal funds. Just a quick overview of the highlights that we're going to cover tonight. We'll touch upon some of the federal sources that we have received and those allocations, and how our plan that we want to move forward with the 11T money. And tonight we're specifically trying to focus most of the presentation on the 11T money and sharing steps with you that we hope to take by recommendation of Michigan Department of Ed. You've seen this slide, you've seen, we've spoken about the coronavirus relief funds, the ESSER funds, the ESSER supplemental, the ESSER 2, the ESSER 3 funds. These are all the one-time monies that have been received and come into the district since the pandemic hit. We touched on in previous meetings where our main focuses were for the use of these funds and shared with you timelines of when we had to use the monies by. We are receiving, not every school district is receiving what is called 11T money, but we are, because we did not receive the full allocation in our ESSER 3 allocation of $1,093 per student. So this is a supplemental payment to make the district whole to equal $1,093 per student. We've completed spending the coronavirus relief money. We're working towards closing out the ESSER 1 and the ESSER supplemental money by September of this year. We are actively involved using ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 monies and spending those based on allocated budgets through MEX Plus that's been approved by MDE. I'm going to turn it over now to Mike, who's going to cover specifics on the next steps on which we would like to take with 11T funds for the district.
So there's a lot on this slide, so bear with me, and I know you have a copy of it, so you may want to refer back to that. 11T money is definitely more restricted than other federal funds. The state legislature set those guidelines in place to pass through federal money to us as an equalization, as Paula said, to level out and allow the amount of money going to each district students to be the same. But to do that, they also added in some new guidelines, which make this possibly the most restrictive out of all the funds that we've received. So briefly, the key component breakdowns. First of all, we're required to spend percentages on certain things, the bulk of which is for learning loss, 56%. There's 10.3 each for summer school and 10.3 for after school. And lastly, that leaves about 28% discretionary for anything that we would have related to the previous ESSER fund allocation methods. So really, ultimately, we're looking at this for around 84%, which would be the 56 for learning loss and the 28 discretionary, that we want to focus on learning loss with our students. We had a meeting with Kevin Walters from MDE. He met with us and a number of other school officials from different districts, and he had very specific recommendations given these guidelines. There were specific groups he talked about, so we definitely had need to serve those students and none others. So we're not allowed to allocate this money for students that don't meet any of the groups that are listed there. And lastly, we have to expend this money by fiscal year 24. So that would mean by the end of the 23-24 school year, ostensibly giving us about 2 years to do that. When we met with Kevin Walters, he had a specific set of recommendations that would allow us to use these funds to the best of our benefit. He recommended offsetting general fund salaries and benefits for staff in our classrooms during the school year, for teachers that teach those students or a fraction of them. Basically, we pay those teachers right now out of the general fund. Kevin is recommending us taking those funds and allowing them to stay in the general fund and offsetting those expenses using $11T. He also says to offset how we've been spending for summer learning opportunities in summer school, salaries and benefits, again for teaching those qualified students. So basically, his recommendation is to use those funds in a way that alleviates the general fund and offsets some of those costs. That would allow us to do something specific in Portage. So since we're always concerned with the longevity of funds, especially if we're using funds to hire new staff, we don't want to create conditions that in a year or 2 years, we hit a limit where now we're having to dip back into the general fund for an extensive amount of staff funding, or potentially have to move towards layoffs or changes in that formula for our teaching staff. So we don't want to create conditions that do that. But our intent is also to continue the way we're doing summer learning and encouraging the students, especially those that may have extra supports necessary post-COVID, to keep them learning, move them back to on track for us. And we definitely want to serve our student community past the 2024 deadline. So to do this, we would like to follow MDE's recommendation, offsetting the salaries and benefits for those selected teachers who teach those students, and create a general fund excess that we would commit to supporting those students. So we would set aside those funds for specific students that would allow us to go past 2024. And to proceed that way, we would need to present a resolution to the board near the end of the upcoming school year to set aside some of those funds for the purposes of learning loss with students to meet how MDE has laid out those funds. That's one of the recommendations, or really it's the prime recommendation from the MDE on using this. Through that, that will allow us to continue to use the funds for a little bit longer than just the 2024 school year, follow MDE's recommendations. We continue to seek input from our community, and ultimately, we would be setting aside these funds to increase supporting student learning, especially in the long term. So that's kind of our look at all of these components. So I know you have all of that in front of you in the packet, and we're still continuing to formulate this and put it together in a budget type of proposal to input into MEG Plus. And other than that, Paul and I are happy to answer any questions you have about the use of the 11T funds to support student learning.
How does it work if the teacher has specific student groups that are, let's say, 30%, right? Is it a pro rata that 30% of their salary would? Okay, so that's how that works. It's not, we can't cover the whole salary if they only have 30% of the kids that fit those criteria.
Right, and it is challenging, and it will be challenging. We met with Dan Vomastic and Ryan Miller our, student information system specialists, Ryan and Dan on technology, to talk about how we're gonna merge this. So we know there's definitely some work in there because we actually have to go by teacher, by the student. So we're not allowed to aggregate in certain ways, in other ways we are allowed to aggregate back to reach a calculation for the staff member.
Right, and obviously some of the teachers are at X and some are at the other end of the scale, so
Correct.
we have to do that also, right?
We do.
Okay.
And that, once we have that calculation worked out, that would allow us to know what we want to set aside for long-term learning loss supports over time.
I would basically come to the board with a dollar amount that we would plan to commit at year-end close, so that we would set those monies aside.
So they just have their, this kind of restricted funds they have set aside, but they really won't be in the fund balance.
Correct, they won't be in the unreserved part.
That's my only fear, is that we grow that fund balance too much. Sounds like a soft landing type approach for beyond it.
While we don't know all the reasons MBE is proposing using the money that way, that's really the primary way they've recommended it. We also will do the other two categories, the after school and the summer school support, that are in there representing the 20.6 funds.
What does it mean, cost for staff who are using high-quality classroom instruction?
So we aren't allowed to offset the salary for their planning period. We aren't allowed to offset if they're doing a seminar at the high school level or just supervising the cafeteria. We can do it if we're doing high-quality instructional practices like literacy skills around vocabulary instruction. We can do it if they're using explicit vocabulary and explicit instruction techniques in the classroom. So we have to be able to back up what the practices are in order to do that, and that's the other pro rata calculation we have to make.
And could it be just inside the classroom for a bona fide class, or could it be targeted intervention that takes place outside the 7 hours of the school day?
Yes, both of those things. So if we know that we have certain students going to one of our support rooms in the elementary, middle, or high school, and the students meet that criteria, we can offset that person's salary by the same amount.
Okay.
And when would you submit a resolution to the board?
Council recommendation was next June. I wouldn't have a final number at that time, but I have an approximate number. So legal counsel has recommended next June.
And what kind of input are we looking for from PTO groups, et cetera?
As we build any of the structures around summer school responses, we'd look to hear what student needs are out there from a board meeting, or what evidences we have through our student surveys, our interactions with principals that they have with parent groups, CIC as well.
Got it.
And all our schools would qualify, right? PCEC also?
Yes.
Okay.
And our goal would be to utilize as much possible to leverage those funds that we can offset within the first 2 years, in the 2 years that we have available to do it.
Right.
We believe we would probably be able to get all of the funds in 2 years offset.
What percentage of our student population with all these different categories do you think fit?
It would definitely be a do you think, because we aren't sure, because they can only be counted once, so if we start getting separate percentages, they would do that. So we're not really totally sure what we're looking at in terms of numbers. Maybe somewhere between 15 to 25%, maybe slightly higher.
Economic disadvantage, right? Free and reduced lunch, we have that number, right?
Those two are the two easiest for us to find.
Okay, and what's our number for economic?
Free reduced is around 25%.
So it's 25% plus right off the bat, right? So,
but if many of them overlap, we're not sure if that means it's 30% or 35%. But we will know soon what that percentage would be.
so, right. And student of color means everything non-white, right?
They asked us to use the national definition for that, so we're still investigating exactly what they mean by it. A lot of our data conversation today was around, it's easy to give us a list of 7 categories. It's much more difficult to say, what do we mean by that? And so we're gonna go back and research the national definition for that particular category. Some of them are easier for us to do. We'll use free and reduced lunch for economically disadvantaged. That's a fairly easy translation. And there, after that, the students with disabilities is a slightly interesting category to work with. We'll probably use IEP's 504s as a primary definition. Then the other categories are a little more easy to define, but smaller student groups.
I mean, we get a number, you know, white, non-white from you guys. I mean, and I just don't know what person of color means, if it's everyone that's non-white or how you lump that in.
Yeah, we ask the same question
Sure.
at MDE, what they would look for.
Right.
So.
And are you concerned about your free and reduced lunch population, maybe numbers being inaccurate because we're gonna have people turn in forms again versus?
It could be.
Any other questions for our presenter? Well, thank you very much. Glad you're working through all that.
Yeah.
We'll now move to our comments and communications section. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board this evening? Okay, thank you. We'll move to the consent agenda, page 5, and we have 2 items tonight, minutes and architect engineer contract approval. The minutes are from the June 27, 22 special meeting, closed session, and regular business meeting. And the architect engineer contract approval is that the Board of Education approve the contract documents between Portage Public Schools, the owner, and Tower Pinkster, the architect, on the 2021 elementary schools bond project in an amount equivalent to 5.9% of the construction costs, the funds for which will come from the 2021 bond fund. Are there any exceptions to the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We'll go to our required action item, which is to approve the superintendent evaluation. Is there a motion, please, on page 15?
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education approve a highly effective rating for Superintendent Mark Healing for the 2021-22 school year based on the results of his annual performance evaluation completed by the board on June 27, 2022.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Randy?
Yes, sir.
See, for 5 board members here, I'm going to abstain since I was not present at that meeting.
Okay.
And I think since we have 4 board members here, we're still fine, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll abstain. So.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yes, a formal evaluation of the superintendent was completed by the board on June 27th for the 2021-22 school year, consistent with our governance process policy 3.12, our superintendent evaluation. And a rating of highly effective is in order based upon the scoring of the evaluation instrument and comments from board members. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes and the highly effective rating is approved. And Mark, I'd just like to say thank you for your leadership, thank you for your service. We're glad you're here, and we're looking forward to another successful school year, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Okay, our next discussion item is naming of facilities. And I want to just start out by saying our work in this area is governed by our commemoration and naming of school facilities policy 7250. And if you recall, the board modified that policy late last year to permit the placement of a permanent monument or other physical representation in or on a facility. So Dale Freeland is here tonight to review the request to rename the field Bob Knight Field. And this is a pretty big deal. We only have one facility in the entire district that's named after a person. And we've got to be sure to get this right. And you know, no one's here that was involved in what happened originally in the 40s and 50s. So we got to make sure we got all our ducks in a row here and understand just what's being asked and how we might move forward. So with that, Ryan, if you'd like to go ahead, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Antwerp, Mr. Beeling, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to present our proposal this evening to you. Again, my name is Dr. Ryan Freeland, and I'm a 1996 graduate of Portage Central High School. I played football for Coach Bob Knight, and my life was forever changed by this extraordinary man. Late last fall, I presented my personal anecdote to this esteemed group, so I will set aside my personal story for sake of time this evening. Rather, I stand here tonight as one of the signatories on the proposal in front of you in triplicate. And more importantly, I represent a bipartisan, I'll call it, army of Mustangs and Huskies who offer their unwavering, galvanized, and unanimous support for this proposal. I assure you that there are supporters of this proposal watching from across the nation tonight. Mr. Van Antwerp has already distributed a copy of the lengthy yet detailed and complete proposal to each of you for your review, so allow me to highlight just a few portions of the proposal. First, allow me to give you the hard sell in why you should say yes. Second, I'd like to provide a little bit of review and framework for the reasons for the triplicate proposal as well as the addenda attached. So within the biography section, which is addendum number 2, I'll read just a summary on Coach Bob Knight to get us all on the same page. Coach Bob Knight modeled toughness, coached coaches, led leaders, rallied people around teamwork, invested in community, built culture, and poured himself into his life's work of teaching, coaching, and mentoring. In doing so, he single-handedly focused the entire culture inside Portage Central High School toward excellence in the early 1970s. We would like to honor him in a way that is commensurate with his impact on the people of Portage. Today we stand as winners because Bob Knight was a winner. We learned the value of team because Coach Bob Knight taught us to value hard work and pour ourselves into a team. We learned to expect more from ourselves because Coach Bob Knight expected more from each one of us than we ever thought was possible. And that mindset has proved transformational for all of us who were impacted by Coach Knight. We now pour ourselves into our own teams, our own vocations, our places of worship, our families, our militaries, our jobs, and all the organizations that we find ourselves a part of because we watched Bob Knight do so. And in the same way, and with these same values that Bob Knight taught us, we hope to inculcate these exact values to the next generations of Mustangs as well as Huskies. By renaming the football field at Portage Central in Coach Knight's honor, we hope to use this exact platform to proclaim his extraordinary story, his enthusiasm for teamwork and toughness, his lifelong investment into the lives of students and educators, his extraordinary vision and his great giftedness, as well as his life-altering coaching and mentorship that was as intense as it was molding and as personally challenging as it was team building. We would like to commemorate this extraordinary coach and educator and proclaim Coach Knight's core values from a most public and appropriate platform by renaming the football field at Portage Central High School Bob Knight Field. We feel that in doing so, we would be able to more effectively remember Coach Knight and galvanize his most laudable legacy and core values into our permanent culture within Portage Public Schools, within Portage Central High School, and across the city at large. So getting to the proposal, in triplicate, why in triplicate? Well, very simply, proposal number 1, to rename the football field at Portage Central High School from McCamley Field at Current to Bob Knight Field. Proposal number 2, to endorse and leave unchanged, but magnify and bring greater attention to the entire set of previously named fields at McCamley. Please see also on page 16 of the proposal current signage that already exists that highlights the fields of McCamley as they are already named. Given the importance of Mr. Stuart McCamley's role and impact on acquiring these fields for Portage Public Schools, we would like to elevate his name and importance by adding signage to highlight this reality and history that all of these athletic fields are indeed the fields at McCamley. Proposal number 3. To focus the alumni, staff, and students of Portage Public Schools, as well as the visitors of the general public, we'd like to build a bronze statue of Coach Knight and place it at the north entrance of the football field. As the supporters of this proposal, we find it decidedly fitting to build a monument to the man who built us. Our plan for this monument is to include bronze plaques that will highlight the details of Coach Knight's life, family, coaching, convictions, idealism, and his impact on Portage Public Schools. In the proposal, I've also included 5 addenda. I will not belabor them here, but just to highlight them. Number 1, a biography of Coach Knight's life, as you can read and gather more detail on his life. Addendum number 2, a detailed and chronologic history of McCamley Field. Addendum number 3, a compilation of letters from proposal supporters. Of note, this addendum includes noteworthy bipartisan Husky and Mustang coaches, administrators, faculty, and alumni. This list includes Coach Pete Skirmerhorn, Coach Knight's highly accomplished and much respected rival and longtime head football coach at Portage Northern High School. Mr. Carl Latour, longtime administrator, Portage Northern High School. 4-time Super Bowler Pete Metzelaars, 2-time Olympic gold medalist Lindsay Tarpley Snow, World Cup winning soccer coach BJ Snow, former Portage Central High School administrators Frank Gawkowski, Floyd Yoder, and Larry Edlund. The list goes on. But the list includes a very distinguished group of athletes, non-athletes, coaches, teachers, community members, all who support unanimously the proposal. Addendum number 4, plans, costs, and logistics. Of note, we project a cost of somewhere between $100,000 and $125,000 for the entire project. The entire project will be privately funded. To be clear, we will not ask for a dime from Portage Public Schools nor Portage Central High School. Addendum number 5. Finally, and arguably most importantly, a letter of endorsement from Coach Bob Knight's widow, Noni Knight. In summary, Mr. Van Antwerp, Mr. Bielang, and members of the board, we understand well the history of McCamley Field. And in a centennial year for Portage Public Schools, we find it profoundly appropriate to esteem, honor, and commemorate one of our great heroes and the most influential Portage Central Mustang of the last 50 years. We confidently acknowledge that Coach Knight and Mr. McCamley made tremendous and lifelong contributions to Portage Public Schools, and we would like to elevate the profile and acclaim of both men, attaching specific, exact, and inclusive criteria to Mr. McCamley for his role in acquiring the land for the fields at McCamley, and to Coach Bob Knight for changing the culture of an entire high school for the good through his driven pursuit of excellence for his teams on the football field. Thank you for your time, Mr. President, Mr. Superintendent, board members. I brought along with me all of the signatories on the proposal, coaches, Schaefer, Enders, and Snow. We're here to answer questions. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and for the very thorough job you did here. It's a very detailed, very well done presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
So are there any questions for our guests?
No questions, but it was a fun read. Very, I really appreciate the detail. I don't know how many board members had a close relationship with Bob Knight, but I was fortunate enough back in the late 90s, Bob Knight stopped in my office and said, Rusty, we need somebody like you on the school board. And I said, gosh, Coach Knight, and I'm a Northern guy. That's the guy did Northern I played against. I said, Coach, I appreciate you. I'm in Kalamazoo. So I said, I can't help you. He said, what do you have to say? Anyways, I promised him, I said, when I move to Portage, when I raise my family, I'm going to be moving to Portage, and then I'll come on the board. And then I moved to Portage, he found out, he was back in my office. You're gonna go to the school board, right? So I don't know how many board members had a real close relationship with Bob Knight.
You introduced me to him.
Huh?
You introduced
Yeah,
me to
so
him.
I just have a funny story. The board's been through a lot. You know, we were going through one of our we'll call it superintendent transitions. And Coach Knight showed up in my office with a bottle of Jack Daniels. Said, appreciate all your hard work, you're gonna need this. So, I mean, he's a dear soul. He's a mentor to many. Me being a crosstown rival, I just, you know, it's sad that the community lost him because he had so much more to do, but I just hope the board moves forward and I would encourage everybody. I mean, tear it up a little bit here because, you know, I really found Coach Knight enduring. So when I was young, there's a center court, which is now the Y. That's where I worked out, and Coach Knight would be down there working out. You know, and he was always nice to me and always fun and just a beautiful person. Beautiful person. So
Great, thank you, Mr. Rapper.
This may be in the addendum somewhere with the existing bronze Mustang statue that's there. Who is that donated by, and what agreements were made for it to be where it is? Because part of the proposal is to move that, is that correct?
Yes, I would have, some of that information is there, not all the information regarding the Mustang. I know there were a group of donors regarding that project.
So I'm assuming they have a vested interest in where it's sitting right now.
That's probably a better question for Portage Central Principal and leadership here, Mr. Eric Albertus. He was, you know, key in that project, I know, but I've already talked to him, and verbally he has said, there are a few places, if I may, there are a few places that I'd like to see that Mustang, maybe closer to the school or that sort of thing. So we have his verbal approval to move it, and to be clear, like the proposal includes the cost of that movement in total. So we can get more details for you on that, sir.
Okay. If there were any, you know, ties to it, the money being donated for it to be in that location, you just need to know that.
Right. It was donated by Miles Standish and former lawyer. You've been in contact and reach out to him if needed.
What are your plans for elevating the image or likeness or Stuart McCamley's contributions to the city and to the school district?
Yeah, excellent question, sir. Initially, I would say more signage to make it more obvious that the whole group of athletic fields here at Portage Central are indeed the fields at McCamley. Case in point, and as we were having this discussion about how to approach this very issue, actually BJ Snow told me, he said, well, the fields are already named the fields at McCamley. I'll run over and snap a picture, and that's the picture that you have in the proposal. I think it's page 16. So it's already named as such, but I think the easy start is more signage. The fields at McCamley from every angle and from every parking lot as appropriate without being overly exuberant with the signage, but I think that's one thing that we can do. And then other than that, we're open to ideas, maybe detailing on a placard his contributions and some of the chronology and the timeline that you see before you. I mean, we're very open to those types of ideas, but certainly signage is kind of the major focus, as it is with the stadium, as it is with the fields. Like if we're gonna put a sign out and a placard out, it would be appropriate for us to do the same with Mr. McCamley.
So you're envisioning placards around the statue of Bob Knight as well?
We are, and I included a couple photos of what they've done at actually Florida State University with the bronze statue of Coach Bowden. And around that statue, which is a little bit larger than lifelike, I think it's about an 8 or 9 foot statue, they have 4 bronze placards. Now there's no magic to the number 4, but they have these bronze placards encircling and explaining who Coach Bowden is or who he was to the university. We envisioned doing something similar for Coach Knight, something right at the statue where you could read about his life, his impact, his years coaching, his idealism, the values, and that's really a focus for us in the proposal writing group, is the values of teamwork and hard work and toughness and faith, family, and football, as Coach Knight would say.
So you're thinking something similar for Mr. McCamley?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any idea where that would be? Or?
Well, we could co-locate it at that site and detail the history of, and we're open to ideas here. We haven't gotten too far down the road in saying exactly where those signage pieces would be, but it could be co-located with Coach Knights at that placard to say, from this year, origin, to this year, perhaps 2022, this field was named McCamley Field for these reasons. So that might be the most appropriate place, but we're open to other ideas if the board feels that it's most appropriate, maybe right out by the main sign by Southwestage at the grand entrance of, parking at the north parking lot at the field. But we're open to those ideas.
Well, there could be a lot on that placard about Mr. McCamley, He was a community leader here his entire life. He was the township supervisor for 20 years. And he was instrumental in putting the district together. The district is made up of 8 independent school districts, and he brought the 3 holdouts into the fold to become Portage Township schools. So, and while he was the township supervisor, the Parks Board was acquiring all the land for McCamley Field, and that's what enabled the school board to buy it for $1 because as we understand it, we were writing out your history this year that the township didn't have money to develop the property, so that was a unique way to get it to the school district. Could you expand on one of the statements in here that Mr. McCamley, by his own decree, named the field?
Our understanding of the history, sir, is pieced together. So as we tried to highlight in the proposal, Coach Schaefer gets most of the credit for looking through handwritten notes of the board that are now 70 plus years old. So as we piece things together, once the fields were sold in 1954, our understanding is Mr. McCamley did put his name on those fields. So our simple understanding is at that time his name was placed on those fields. And again, we're piecing together handwritten notes that are hardly legible from 70 years ago. But correct me if I'm wrong, Coach Schaefer, but that's our understanding that Mr. McCamley was involved in the naming of the facility originally. We don't have much further detail than that, as you can imagine.
Yeah. It was our understanding when we were writing this book that when the district acquired the fields in 1955, McCamley was already off the school board, and that when we acquired the fields, they were already named McCamley Field. So,
at the time in 1955, you're saying?
55, they were acquired, not 54, and he lost his bid for township supervisor in 57, and the field was, open in 58. So I don't know how much he had to do with naming it after he was on the school board or any of that. It sounded like it was McCamley Field and the district acquired it. So anyway, for what that's worth. Yes, sir.
So you're referring to the statement, correct?
I'm referring to the land.
Well, the practice football field in the early 50s was called McCamley Field.
Oh.
And whether or not, obviously none of us were present during that discussion, it could have been as simple as, hey Stuart, in honor for you brokering this deal between the parks and the school board, we're just going to name this area, this football field, after you.
Yeah.
And he may have said, you don't have to do that. And everybody else may have said, oh, yes, we do.
Yeah, we really don't know.
We really don't know. But
right.
To be clear, the original McCamley Field is the practice football field. And then when I can't think of the date right off the top of my head, as he developed the stadium that was built in 58, they named that. They like, this is where we're going to play. We've always played on McCamley Field, so we're going to call this McCamley Field, not McCamley Stadium, McCamley Field. So that's how
Okay. questions?
We haven't identified any process to move forward with this, correct?
Well, our policy.
Tonight is just fact finding.
Yeah, we're not gonna take any action tonight, and our policy, would allow us to vote on it at some point, or to put a committee together to vet the proposal. So, I'm not sure what the board's pleasure is, we're missing 2 board members tonight.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be important. 2 things that seem appropriate is well, one in particular, since this is something that has impacted the community for a long time and will moving forward, whatever we decide to propose in a broad way, I think we need a period of community response. 30 days, whatever it would be.
Yeah, maybe some,
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Well, I think everyone at the table understands the contributions Coach Knight made to Portage Central, and as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, we all certainly acknowledge that. We just have to work through our process here and figure out how we might get this all done, so.
How long would it take you guys to do your part? I mean, if we said yes, the fall's coming close, okay? So I'm assuming you have to contract somebody to build a statute and all that stuff. That's not 30-day work. That's gotta be.
That was a question I had.
Months, right?
So it's 12 to 15 months to do everything, but also you want to get something going very quickly, though, on a temporary basis.
Yeah, I think we see this in 2 phases. The first phase is get the signage out there. Change the name, Bob Knight Field, road signage, parking signage, fields at McCamley, elevate those things. The second phase would be the bronze statue project. And we've got 2 different quotes with very different timelines, but the range is, what we were told is 8 to 15 months. So 8 to 15 months from time of contract. So it takes a while to obviously develop a mold and cast and that sort of thing. So I think the statue would lag behind the actual renaming. So we're looking, and I think we could rename. We'd work to update signage as soon as possible, and I think that could be done. That could all be done this fall. I think what we'd be waiting on for a year is the bronze statue with the bronze placards, with Mr. McCamley's information, with Coach Knight's information, that sort of thing, as well as movement of the Mustang.
Any thought about doing it all at the same time to just create a bigger bang for your buck, so to speak?
Committee, thoughts? I know I'm speaking for us on a couple things, but I think we were just most excited about the prospect of renaming the field and then getting that signage up and identifying this as Coach Bob Knight Field and raising awareness for Mr. McCamley, that sort of thing. And I think we collectively have kind of looked at the bronze statue as sort of the cherry on top, or the final, grand finale sort of thing, to put our punctuation mark on this is Bob Knight Field. It just happened to take much longer than we would have hoped for. Rather, if we could get a bronze statue commissioned and gilded and built in the next 2 months, we would love to do so. So we're also open to that. We're open to that. If the board sees it fit to do that, we could work our best to coordinate those timelines for signage as well as placards plus statue.
Ryan, do you have the financial part of this? Do you have a fundraising effort in mind?
We do. Again, all the funds would be privately contributed. So we have already reached out to a long list of folks who are very interested in the project. We've had a great deal of interest, and folks even approaching us saying, hey, I heard through the grapevine that this might be happening. As soon as the board approves this, please let me know. So we have a long list of people who I would say have big hearts, deep pockets, and long arms for this project.
So are you imagining, for the sign part of it, updating the signs that the district has put there already, or the new ones would be part of the district graphic standards? How would that be?
I think we would just add to the signage that's already out. I think we would add a few signs at strategic places around parking lots, but I think our idea is they would look exactly the same as district standard. With that caveat, we probably need to update the McCamley Field, again, page 16, where that shows up, with Bob Knight Field, but the other signs would look exactly the same. The fields at McCamley, directions, directional arrows, that sort of thing. But we're not looking to replace all of the signage out there. We're looking to simply add to and update as appropriate.
So those signs they have currently are panel,
Yeah.
so they're made to be changed.
They are.
So it's pretty simple process, especially as new as they are. That shouldn't be a problem. Randy, what do you think in a timeline though? I mean, it sounds like you guys would like to get going sooner rather than later. And I'm kind of, you know, I felt some insulting to Coach Knight. We dragged this out. You know, I'd rather see this, you know, I don't want it to drag out. I mean, I know I asked, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago where this stood, because I was like, I thought it died. Like, and I talked to Mark about it, and I was very happy to see when we got the report. But does anybody have any thoughts on when they, like, I mean, you don't know unintended consequences, but I just can't comprehend, you know, it's really Central's field. You know, here we're all northern people sitting up here.
It is now. If it was 5 years ago, there might be a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Okay? And I would be one of those if we have a stadium on the other side of town. But the way it stands today and what I work for, and a lot of people work for, I don't have a problem doing what you guys are trying to do.
You know, and so I'm just thinking, especially as being this side of town. I mean,
Right.
It's unique. Well, all 7 board members are Portage Northern based. I don't know.
Well, we'll get with the other board members. I think this is a very important thing. Everybody ought to be involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
See what we can do.
Our next meeting is August, so I mean, I would think it could be on the agenda then, right?
Could we consider making an action in August, or
We can do it right there, right? I mean, we've done everything
discussion
else.
and action with everybody?
Sure.
Everybody
Everybody does, yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about starting for this football season, right? Is that the thought?
That's the goal, yes.
So if we're talking about that, but we have the August, we have 1 meeting.
I would still ask for an opportunity for the community to be fully aware of where we're going with this, and just make sure somebody doesn't have anything that they want to say about it.
Well,
So that would be my only hesitation with going ahead.
right, so we could, how do we let the community know now then? Because it's like, our next meeting is like a month from now, right?
Right,
Just before the football season.
right.
So how do we get it out there to let the community know that we are strongly considering this? Because, you know, nothing's gonna happen for 4 weeks now. But we can do this and we can have everything ready to go, you know.
You have to do a press release, right? You do a press release of some sort that we're considering this and ask for community input. It's the only way you could do it. I mean, I don't know how we do that, but I mean.
We have a communications person.
Right.
Well, I would like to get something moving, you know, maybe,
Right.
maybe that's just my personal.
Right.
Okay.
So,
We'll be back to it in our August meeting, and in the meantime, we'll do some work internally and see where we're at then after we talk to our other board members, okay?
Thank you,
Thank
President.
you very much.
Thank you, Board.
Okay, our next agenda item is the Grand Rapids Building Services Custodial Contract Extension.
Johnny's back up, walk you through this one.
Thank you again, Superintendent Beelang, as well as President Van Antwerp and the members of the Board of Education. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve a 10-month contract extension for custodial services with Grand Rapids Building Services, or GRBS for our custodial services, for $1,787,770. GRBS has been a provider of cleaning services in education, medical, corporate, and manufacturing facilities throughout Michigan. And we've been in a partnership with GRBS for over 12 years. We've worked through the terms and conditions with our attorney, Trone Law Firm. Just some of the key highlights of this contract would be an increase in the minimum wage for GRBS employees to recruit and retain staff, the addition of a weekend supervisor position. We also restructured the contractual ending date to be aligned with our fiscal year of June 30th. We continue to have a hybrid staffing system of PPS custodians during the day and GRBS providing those evening services. But in addition to the contract, we're working with GRBS to provide nightly summaries to communicate with our PPS custodians. PPS and GRBS will also like to pilot a quality control program in select schools. The pilot is designed for PPS staff to give praise or report concerns for a quick response time. And I will be happy to answer any questions about the contract. And if the board, at the conclusion of any questions, if the board is comfortable, then I will request that the item be moved from discussion to action.
Any questions tonight for Johnny? Johnny, I don't think we ever saw a GRBS contract this thick or with this much information. I think everything's there.
Yes, my understanding is we have been working off addendums, and so being new and wanting to make sure we had a clear understanding, I asked that we be provided in the contract in its entirety and to walk through those items so that both parties are on the same page.
Right. Any questions for Johnny?
Just a comment, you know, Johnny, I've been hard on GRBS, and I hope you guys continue to be hard on it. I intend to approve this tonight, but I'm still not 100% pleased with their past performance, and I have very high expectations, and hopefully you can communicate that to them, because, I mean, some of the work has been just embarrassing over the years. So.
All right, appreciate that. Yeah, and that's the reason why we want to pilot this quality control program with a few schools. This is something new that GRBS has brought on. We also kind of push the envelope about accountability, but making sure when our custodians come in the morning, they're not walking in cold and not knowing that things weren't done the night prior. Then the quality control component, before we go district-wide, we want to try how it works in a few select schools so we get immediate response. Typically, the response is typically reactive after a person has been upset about something for several days or weeks, and then we get an email. Well, what we want to know is if there is a concern about any portion of cleaning, that it be brought to our attention right away so it can be corrected. And then it's also another way of accounting to make sure that they're being held accountable for the areas within our building that need to be cleaned at night. So I appreciate your comment.
I know when this was discussed at the retreat back in May, one of the things that was said was basically it's too late for us to find anyone else even if we want to. So over the course of the next year, will you be looking at other options just so that we're covered if this doesn't work out? I don't want to be negative, I want to be positive and say this is going to work and it's going to be great, but we don't want to find ourselves in that situation going forward if we need to make a change. We
would have several options to consider over the course of this school year. November or December would be the sweet spot to do an RFP, to solicit proposals and to interview other firms. You know, once you go through the RFP process, you may find that what we have is the best service or not. You also want to be fair that if you're going to transition a third party like this to this magnitude, that they would need ample time to bring on their startup costs and employees as well. So November, December is our sweet spot for making a determination on an RFP, and it also gives us some time to evaluate the start of our school year as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that said, you know, I still feel, yeah, and hopefully they perform. You know, but I feel like if you had a PPS employee in that position, they would, you know, they'd have a lot more buy-in, you know, and personally accountable. This was my building, and these people are so nomadic, you know, hopefully, you know, they just don't have ownership like a PPS employee would, so.
It's just hard to say in today's environment that we can even find enough people to hire on ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion, please, to bring this item to action on page 59?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make the motion that the Board of Education move the custodial service contract discussion into an action item.
Thank you, Kurt. There's support.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The custodial services contract is now an action item. Is there a motion, please?
Sure, Mr. President, I'd like to make the following motion that the Board of Education approve a 10-month contract extension for the custodial service contract with Grand Rapids Building Services, GRBS, for custodial services for the $1,785,770.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes and the custodial services contract is approved. That takes us to the end of our agenda, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Here you go.